The Predator Class, How the Left's Elite Hunt, Groom, and Own Their Followers. I did not want to write this. I had lesson plans to grade, a family of 6 to feed and put to bed, about 14 better things to do with my evening. But recent events, a third assignation attempt by a teacher, had me go through my old articles and spoke to me. It is time for updated information. My name is Mike Bieske, 23 years Army combat medic, deployed to Iraq as a line medic, paramedic in Cleveland, which, if you have ever run calls there, you know is its own kind of combat zone. Started teaching while still in the reserves, working in a high-need, high-risk district where every kid qualifies for free lunch, and the public school system had basically handed them a white flag. Published 2 science textbooks, father of 4. When I argue something, I back it up with primary sources, peer-reviewed data, and the same standard I hold my students to every single day. Thomas Sowell said it better than I ever could. There are 3 questions that would destroy most arguments on the left. Compared to what? At what cost? And what hard evidence do you have? 3 questions. Still waiting on a coherent answer from the other side. What I am about to lay out is not political opinion. It is documented, peer-reviewed, historically verified. If you disagree, bring data. Not feelings, data. There is a predator class operating in American political life. They identify vulnerable people, groom them for dependency, strip them of critical thinking, and harvest their votes, their labor, their energy, and sometimes their lives. This is not a conspiracy theory. It is textbook predatory psychology applied at industrial scale. And the scariest part is that the people doing it are celebrated for it. Before I explain how the machine operates, I need to tell you 2 things. First, who it targets. Second, the clinical mechanism it uses. Because once you understand the science, you will never look at a political rally, a social justice campaign, or a university DEI training the same way again. The prey profile, who the machine is built to target. Narcissists do not pick their targets randomly. Neither do the full dark tetrad personality types: narcissism, Machiavellianism, psychopathy, and sadism. These individuals scan for what clinical researchers call high-yield targets. People who can reliably provide what they need with minimal resistance and maximum return. The selection process is calculated, rapid, and research shows remarkably accurate. Studies document that individuals high in psychopathic traits can identify previously victimized individuals with significant accuracy simply by watching them walk. Gait, walking style, stride length, weight shifts, arm-leg coordination. Not a conversation, not a background check, a walk. What they are reading in that walk is a cluster of documented vulnerability signals: low confidence, submissive posture, reduced environmental awareness, the physical signature of a person who has been diminished and carries that history in the way they move. Inmates scoring higher on Factor 1 psychopathy traits were more accurate at identifying these individuals and explicitly cited gait as the reason for their judgment. Scale that to a political movement, and the question becomes, what does the equivalent of a vulnerable gait look like in a population? The research on personality and political orientation answers that with uncomfortable precision. People who identify as liberal or progressive score significantly higher, on average, on 2 specific Big 5 personality traits: openness to experience and the compassion facet of agreeableness. In plain English, curiosity, aesthetic and emotional sensitivity, empathic concern, genuine tender-heartedness toward people who are suffering. They also score modestly higher on neuroticism, which researchers link to anxiety, emotional reactivity, and vulnerability to distress. The weighted correlation between openness to experience and liberal orientation is approximately R equals -0.145, with conservatism nearly twice the effect size of any other Big 5 predictor. These are not character flaws. These are beautiful qualities. They're also in the hands of a predator, operating at industrial scale, an extraordinarily exploitable vulnerability profile. High empathy means you will extend compassion and second chances to people who have not earned them. High agreeableness means you will prioritize the group's comfort over your own discomfort when something feels wrong. High neuroticism means chronic anxiety makes you more dependent on the group's approval and more susceptible to fear-based messaging. Now look at where left-leaning people are most concentrated: K-12, education, nursing, therapy, social work, psychology, the humanities. Some surveys find liberal to conservative faculty ratios of 33:1 or higher in certain fields. These are the professions that select for maximum empathy, high tolerance for self-sacrifice, and an intrinsic orientation toward helping people who cannot help themselves. The machine did not build its coalition in those spaces accidentally. It went where the most empathetic, most agreeable, most emotionally open, most help-oriented people in the country already were. Then it told them, your empathy is your identity. Your cause is your community. We see you. We need you. You are finally home. And then there's the piece that genuinely broke my heart when I read the data. LGBTQ plus Americans identify as Democratic at approximately 80%, representing 21% of Democrats compared to 3% of Republicans. What is less discussed, because it is deeply uncomfortable, is the childhood trauma data attached to that population. Studies consistently show that LGBT individuals report adverse childhood experiences at dramatically elevated rates. 83% reporting at least one ACE, compared to 64% of heterosexuals, with over 50% reporting 3 or more ACEs. Among transgender individuals, the numbers are even more striking. Studies show 91% report at least one ACE, with 60% reporting 4 or more, compared to approximately 16% in the general population. Recent data on high school students found LGBTQ plus youth averaging 3 ACEs compared to 1.8 for cisgender and heterosexual peers, with transgender and gender questioning youth averaging 3.5. I am not citing these numbers to weaponize them. I am citing them because they describe, with clinical precision, a population that has experienced significant childhood disruption, family instability, abuse, and disconnection, and that experiences, as a direct consequence, elevated rates of anxiety, depression, low self-esteem, and a desperate desire for community and belonging. That is not a political observation. That is a clinical one. And the predator class built a political movement, specifically engineered to find people in exactly that pain, offer them exactly what they need most: belonging, purpose, moral clarity, a family that finally understands, and extract from them exactly what the machine requires. Here is what the same research makes absolutely clear, and I want to be precise. The dark tetrad personality traits are not the profile of left-leaning voters. A 2023 through 2024 systematic meta-analysis found essentially zero association between political orientation and psychopathy R equals 0.02, narcissism R equals 0.05, or Machiavellianism R equals 0.03. The voters are not the predators. The voters are the prey. The dark tetrad lives in the leadership class, the architects of the machine, not in the good-hearted, anxious, empathetic, trauma-shaped people the machine recruits. That distinction matters enormously. It means the person in your life caught in this system is not broken, not stupid, not malicious. They are someone whose best qualities, their empathy, their desire to belong, their genuine concern for suffering, made them exactly what a predator class was looking for. That deserves rescue, not ridicule. Idealization, devaluation, discard, hoovering. Repeat. If you have ever been in a relationship with a narcissist, or if someone you love has, you know the cycle. Even if you did not have a name for it at the time. Clinical psychologists describe 4 predictable phases in narcissistic abuse relationships. I am going to walk through all 4, not because I want to talk about relationships, because this cycle runs the entire American progressive political apparatus. Once you see it, you recognize it everywhere. Phase 1, idealization, also called love bombing. The narcissist puts you on a pedestal, showers you with excessive praise, attention, affection, shared values, intense intimacy, and future faking, which is making grand promises about a shared future that they never intend to keep. It moves impossibly fast. It feels too good to be true. That is because it is. In political terms, this looks like, you are on the right side of history. You are one of the good people. We finally see you. We understand your pain. We are your family now. This movement is your purpose. The world has been unfair to you, and we are going to fix it together. But here is where it gets more specific and more insidious. The modern progressive machine did not just love bomb individuals. It love bombed entire demographic categories. And the mechanism was identity politics. Here's how it works. You are black, or gay, or trans, or a woman, or an immigrant, or disabled, or poor. The machine says, we see your group. We see that your group has been marginalized, excluded, dismissed, and harmed. And we see who is doing it to you. Those people, the ones who oppose us, the conservatives, the Republicans, the right wing. They are the reason your group is suffering. And only we will protect you from them. That is not advocacy. That is a textbook predatory gambit. It has a clinical name, rescuer framing. The predator establishes themselves as the only barrier between you and the designated threat, which means leaving the group does not just mean losing community. It means surrendering your protection, going back to the people who want to harm you. It is extraordinarily effective, and it is almost completely fabricated. The left has been running cities with the highest black poverty rates, the worst black-on-black violence statistics, the most broken public school systems, and the most dysfunctional housing markets for 50 consecutive years. But they are your protectors, from the people who are not running those cities. The love bombing does not stop at belonging and purpose. It assigns you a victim identity that the movement then promises to avenge. You are not just welcomed into the family, you are told exactly who hurt you, why you feel the way you feel, and why only this movement can make it right. The dopamine hit is real. The belonging feels real. The moral clarity feels like a lifeline when your actual life has been confusing and painful. That is the hook. Pace 2, devaluation. The pedestal cracks. The warmth withdraws. The movement standards become impossible to keep up with. Yesterday's progressive is today's heretic not because anything changed, but because the movement needs members anxious, competing, and desperate to prove loyalty. The tactics shift to gaslighting, you are too sensitives. Projection, accusing you of exactly what they are doing, triangulation, introducing rivals or threats, silent treatment, and subtle put-downs disguised as concern. With covert narcissists specifically, the devaluation does not look like open hostility. It looks like death by 1,000 cuts. In progressive politics, your allyship is questioned. Your language is scrutinized. Your silence on one issue is held against you. Why did you not march? Why did you not attend the rally? Your statement on another was not quite right. You are not doing enough. Your discomfort with a policy reveals your privilege. Your disagreement reveals your bias. You are never pure enough. And the more you scramble to prove loyalty, the more supply the movement extracts from your exhaustion. Phase 3, discard. When supply runs low, when you start asking too many questions, when you cannot keep up with the purity spiral, the movement discards you. RFK Jr. questioned vaccine policy. Gone. Elon Musk said people should speak freely. Gone. Joe Rogan asked uncomfortable questions about COVID. Gone. Tulsi Gabbard criticized the military-industrial complex, and Hillary Clinton called her a Russian asset on television. J.K. Rowling said biological sex is real and now receives death threats. None of them left. The movement left them. Phase 4, hoovering. Every election cycle, the machine sucks its former victims back in. The crisis is bigger. The stakes are higher. This is the most important election of our lifetime. Your rights are being stripped away. Democracy is dying. You have to come back. The trauma bond, once established, is extraordinarily durable. Intermittent reinforcement, unpredictable alternation of reward and punishment produces the same neurological attachment pattern as addiction. If any of this sounds like a relationship you have been in, it is because you have been in this relationship. Millions of good people are in it right now. Being targeted does not mean you are weak. It means a predator recognized the qualities that make you human and used them against you. That is not your failure. That is theirs. And naming the mechanism is the first step to breaking free of it. Your brain is not broken. It is being weaponized against you. Here's the neuroscience. I put this in a published textbook, so when I explain how your brain works, I am not guessing. Multiple neuroimaging studies published in legitimate academic journals have documented structural differences in the brains of self-identified liberals versus conservatives. A landmark 2011 study found that self-reported political liberalism correlated with greater gray matter volume in the anterior cingulate cortex, while political conservatism correlated with increased right amygdala size. The largest fMRI study of its kind, 174 adults, Ohio State and Pittsburgh, published in PNAS Nexus, found that functional brain connectivity accurately predicted political ideology at a level matching the strongest known predictor in political science, parental ideology. The amygdala is your threat processing center. Larger means faster, more calibrated threat responses. Smaller means you require a bigger perceived threat before the alarm fires. The Democrat media apparatus figured this out. So they do not give you small threats. Democracy is dying today. Fascism arrived last Tuesday. They crank it to 11 just to get the alarm to trigger, and then they cannot turn it off. The anterior cingulate cortex handles conflict resolution and error detection. When overactivated, when firing constantly because you are submerged in a media environment engineered to produce continuous low-grade alarm, it does not help you update your beliefs. It gets stuck. It loops. It protects the existing framework rather than questioning it. The brain built to detect errors starts using that capacity to defend the conclusion it already reached. Separately, Kierkegaard's analysis of the General Social Survey, over 64,000 respondents, spanning 1972 to 2018, found consistent associations between extreme left-wing political ideology and negative mental health measures across all 5 measures studied. The extremely liberal category showed a 150% higher rate of mental illness compared to moderates. Bullenkamp and Voges found 78% of psychiatric outpatients in therapeutic residential settings preferred left-wing parties, versus 56% of the general population, a statistically significant difference across multiple countries. Among very liberal young women aged 18 to 29, rates of reporting chronic poor mental health doubled compared to conservative counterparts. One dataset found 56% of white liberal women in that bracket in chronic poor mental health. The number for very conservative women in the same demographic, 27%. The party that claims to be the compassionate one, that wraps itself in mental health awareness. In "You Are Not Alone." In "We See You," that party's core voting bloc is in measurably worse psychological shape than the people they have spent 40 years calling heartless. And they are not trying to fix it. They are maintaining it. A woman quit her job in April 2025 and moved into her car because she discovered her employer had voted for Trump. She had thousands of supporters cheering her on. Not one Democrat politician said, wait, this person needs actual help. Because a woman in a car blaming Republicans is not a person in crisis to them. She is a campaign ad. Quinn's Law #4. Liberalism only succeeds when the public is scared into believing it will not survive without it. A calm, rational, well-informed citizen is their worst nightmare. Because a calm person asks souls 3 questions and the whole house of cards collapses, the 500-year playbook in the list, they read into Congress in 1963. This did not start with Twitter. It started in 1513 with Niccolo Machiavelli, who documented 4 things every successful authoritarian in history has done. People accept change more easily when it comes gradually. The frog in the pot is documented behavioral psychology. Appear virtuous even if you are not, because the masses judge by what they see. Neutralize opposition by making it look illegitimate before you silence it. And control the institutions before you need to control the people. Saul Alinsky published Rules for Radicals in 1971. Dedicated, look it up, to Lucifer. Hillary Clinton wrote her 1969 Wellesley senior thesis on Alinsky's methods. Barack Obama taught workshops on them in Chicago. These are documented facts. Rule 5, ridicule is man's most potent weapon. Rule 10, maintain constant pressure because a resolved issue loses mobilization power. Rule 13, pick the target, freeze it, personalize it, polarize it. Do not attack an idea. Make a specific person radioactive. In 1967, West German radical Rudi Dutschke proposed the long march through the institutions. Not violent revolution, patient, generational infiltration. Replace the personnel and the values follow automatically, working against the established institutions while working within them. His words, 1967. University professors in social sciences and humanities now lean liberal over conservative by ratios exceeding 10-1. In the 2018 midterms, 99.7% of political donations from top Hollywood executives went to Democrats. A 2020 analysis found 60% of US journalists identifying as Democrats or Democratic leaning. January 10th, 1963. Congressman Albert Herlong stood on the floor of the House and read into the permanent congressional record a list of 45 communist goals for America, drawn from W. Cleon Skousen's research. I am not asking you to believe in a conspiracy. I am asking you to evaluate outcomes. Goal 17, get control of the schools and use them as transmission belts for socialism. Goal 28, eliminate prayer in schools. The Supreme Court had already done that in 1962, 1 year before this list was read aloud. Goal 40, discredit the family as an institution. Goal 41, emphasize raising children away from parental influence. Goal 29, discredit the Constitution as old-fashioned. These are not theoretical projections, they are measured outcomes. The list is in the congressional record. Quinn's Law has shown. Liberalism always generates the exact opposite of its stated intent. They said they would help the poor. They created generational poverty. They said they would strengthen families. They destroyed them. The law operates without caring about intentions. It is a cult. And the leaders are exactly who you would expect. Strong word, loaded word, the kind of word that makes people stop scrolling and either lean in or start typing. Good, lean in. Because here is something the mainstream never says out loud. Cult leaders are not random, They are not just charismatic. They're not just passionate believers who took things too far. Across the documented literature on destructive high control groups, cult leaders consistently exhibit a specific, recognizable personality profile, and that profile is the dark tetrad. The clinical overlap is not subtle. Narcissism provides the grandiose self-image that makes the leader believe they alone possess the truth. Machiavellianism provides the cold, strategic intelligence to build and maintain control systems without ever appearing to do so. Psychopathy provides the absence of remorse, the ability to use people up and discard them without losing a minute of sleep. Sadism provides the appetite for other suffering that emerges when the devaluation phase begins. This is not a metaphor. This is how researchers who study both cult dynamics and dark tetrad personality structure describe the overlap. The voters are not the cult leaders. The voters are the target's empathetic, agreeable, trauma-shaped people who were specifically selected because their psychological profile makes them susceptible to the cycle I just described. The cult leaders are the architects who built the machine. The strategists, the media executives, the party officials, the academic administrators who captured the institutions over 50 years, they know exactly what they are doing. With that in mind, here's a checklist. I went through every academic criterion for destructive cult behavior. Every single one. The modern progressive movement checks every box. Isolation from family. Every cult manual starts here. Sever outside relationships. Make the group the only source of identity and belonging. Politically mixed marriages in America dropped from 30% to 21% between 2016 and 2020. Over a quarter of Americans are estranged from family members, and politics is the #1 driver. Yale psychiatrist Dr. Amanda Calhoun encouraged cutting off MAGA relatives as essential for your mental health. A licensed psychiatrist told people to abandon their families over a vote. The left cheered. Absolute conformity. House Democrats voted together 98% of the time in 2021, the highest rate on record. Senate Democrats hit 96.5% unity in 2024, highest ever recorded for a majority party. That level of conformity does not happen in a body where people are actually thinking independently. It happens when dissent is punished. Ask Joe Manchin, destroyed by his own party the moment he voted his conscience. During Trump's March 2025 address to Congress, over a dozen House Democrats staged a coordinated walkout in matching racist shirts. Matching. They came with a uniform. Uniforms are what cults wear. Thought-terminating cliches. Educate yourself. Check your privilege. Do better. Full stop. It's not up for debate. None of these contain an argument. They are intellectual emergency exits. I teach teenagers to identify these techniques. My students' kids from one of the most challenging districts in the state can spot an ad hominem attack by the end of the first week. Adults with advanced degrees and blue check marks cannot construct a single argument without tripping over at least 3 logical fallacies. Language control. Quick, define woman. If you just felt your stomach clench, you understand the problem. A sitting Supreme Court justice could not define a word every 5-year-old understands. I'm not a biologist. She is going to rule on cases involving sex definitions under federal law. She cannot tell you what a woman is. George Orwell wrote a novel about this in 1949. The left read it and apparently took notes. Public confession rituals. Mao Zedong called these struggle sessions. The left calls them professional development. Same function, different catering. Coca-Cola told employees to try to be less white. Universities hold anti-racism sessions where white staff confess inherent racism on command. Corporate DEI training requires self-flagellation as a condition of employment. The need to put they, them, or whatever on your profile, your email, your everyday speech when introducing yourself. Once you have confessed, the group holds it over you permanently. That is not an accident. That is a control mechanism. Information control. The Hunter Biden laptop story? Suppressed. The lab leak theory? Misinformation. Until it suddenly was not. The Twitter files revealed that the FBI made over 10,000 visits to Twitter offices to coordinate content moderation. 10,000. And when Elon Musk exposed this, they tried to destroy him for showing you what they were doing. They have built an information bubble where followers only consume approved content and then have the audacity to tell us we live in an echo chamber. Apocalyptic threat maintenance. Everything is always an existential crisis. Climate change will kill everyone in 12 years. No wait. 10, no wait. We moved the deadline again. Democracy is always under attack. Every election is the most important of our lifetime. Every Republican is literally Hitler until the next Republican comes along and somehow manages to be even more Hitler than the last one. This is not organic. This is manufactured. It is the lever that keeps the trauma-bonded voter from ever calming down long enough to evaluate the relationship clearly. Financial and professional control. PayPal closing accounts of dissenters. GoFundMe freezing funds for wrong causes. Banks deplatforming people for political views. Advertiser boycotts. Corporate blacklisting. Once they smell weakness, they escalate. Never apologize to the mob. The mob does not want your apology. It wants your destruction. The excommunicated. RFK Jr., environmental champion for decades, questioned vaccine policy. Gone overnight. Elon Musk, climate hero, progressive poster child, said people should speak freely. Excommunicated. Joe Rogan asked uncomfortable COVID questions. Dangerous misinformation spreader. Tulsi Gabbard criticized the military-industrial complex. Hillary Clinton called her a Russian asset on television. J.K. Rowling said biological sex is real, and now receives death threats. These people did not leave the left. The left left them. One wrong thought, one moment of intellectual honesty, and 40 years of loyalty means nothing. Furniture the second you stop being useful to the collective. Wealthy shepherds of the flock. Nancy Pelosi, net worth over $120 million. The Obamas, $12 million. Martha's Vineyard estate. Oceanfront, from the people warning you about rising sea levels. Chuck Schumer, over $9 million. Elizabeth Warren, over $12 million. Champion of the working class, worth 8 figures. John Kerry, hundreds of millions through marriage. Flies private jets to climate summits. Bernie Sanders, the socialist. 3 houses. Net worth over $3 million. Champagne socialists, preaching redistribution from gated communities. Sending their kids to private schools while telling you that school choice is racist. Matthew chapter 7, verse 15. Beware of false prophets who come to you in sheep's clothing, but inwardly are ravenous wolves. You will know them by their fruits, not by their bumper stickers, not by their yard signs, by their fruits. When Charlie Kirk was assassinated, Congress held a moment of silence. The left interrupted it, literally yelled through prayers for a dead man's family, then went on TikTok to dance. That is the fruit. Quinn's Law #2. If you want to know what liberals are up to, pay attention to what they accuse conservatives of doing. They call us a cult while excommunicating anyone who asks a question. They call us fascists while weaponizing every institution of government against political opponents. Every accusation is a confession. The pawns, and why this is the darkest part of all of it. Here is something most people miss entirely, and it is the part that genuinely broke something in me when I finally understood it. Hakeem Jeffries and Ketanji Brown Jackson are not the predator class. They are the product of it. That distinction is crucial. The people at the top of the machine, the actual architects of this system, are not the ones you see on television. The ones you see on television are the elevated pawns, placed in high visibility positions, not because they will exercise independent judgment, but because their psychological profile, shaped by the same grooming processes described in this article, guarantees they reliably will not. Clinical research on dark tetrad-style organizational behavior describes this phenomenon plainly. Machiavellian leadership does not want its high-profile positions filled by other predators who might compete for dominance. It wants those positions filled by high empathy, high compliance, approval-seeking individuals whose need for belonging and validation makes them predictable instruments, not free agents. Instruments. Think about what Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson was selected to do. Not to exercise independent legal judgment, her record demonstrates clearly that the outcome is loaded before the analysis begins. She was selected because her psychological profile, shaped over decades of progressive institutional immersion, makes her extraordinarily predictable. When she could not define woman during her confirmation hearings, "I'm not a biologist," that was not ignorance. She is a Harvard-educated attorney. She knows the biological definition of a woman. What she demonstrated was that the social cost of providing the correct answer, the risk of ideological excommunication, was higher than the professional cost of looking absurd before the United States Senate. When she cited the Black Codes laws passed by southern states specifically to disarm freed Black Americans so the Ku Klux Klan could terrorize them as valid historical traditions supporting gun control, and did not notice the irony, that was not stupidity. That was a mind so thoroughly captured by the ideological framework that it could no longer recognize when the framework led to an absurd, historically obscene conclusion. Justice Alito called it the height of irony. She made the argument anyway. The framework demanded it. The framework won. Hakeem Jeffries voted for a clean continuing resolution 29 times in a row. On the 30th vote, the exact same document became a partisan Republican spending bill that continues to gut the healthcare of the American people. He voted to let ACA COVID subsidies expire twice in 2021 and again 2022, then screamed about the explosion and blamed Republicans. 32 murders in New York City in early 2026, all 5 boroughs. He posted about those victims 0 times. Then 6 Americans died in Operation Epic Fury. And his first response, before families were even notified, used the phrase reckless decision. Not because he is evil, because the machine told him what today's approved response looks like, and he performed it. The windsock does not know it is a windsock. That is the whole point. The genius, and it is a dark, malevolent genius of the predator class, is that it does not need its most visible positions filled by predators. It needs them filled by people whose psychological profile makes them predictably compliant. The real predators stay hidden. The pawns take the cameras. And when the pawns eventually become liabilities, they get discarded too. Just like everyone else, the machine uses up. The machine does not just discard its pawns quietly. Sometimes it sends them to die and calls it activism. Renee Nicole Good was 37 years old, a poet, a queer woman married to her wife Becca, mother of 3, part of the Minnesota Ice Watch protest network opposing Trump's immigration enforcement operations. On January 7th, 2026, she was shot multiple times by an ICE agent through her car window near an Operation Metro Surge site. The left canonized her immediately, vigils, tributes, nationwide protests. What they did not headline was a document her network had been circulating, the De-Arrest Primer, a manual, written instructions teaching protesters physical tactics to interfere with federal arrests, how to break agents' grips, how to pull detainees free, how to physically obstruct law enforcement. The manual itself acknowledged these tactics could constitute assault. The machine handed her a playbook that put her in federal crossfire, amplified her death as martyrdom, and moved on to the next crisis. Alex Preddy, 37, an ICU nurse and VA employee, was killed in the same Minneapolis protest wave days later. Another person radicalized in the same far-left encrypted chat networks, placed in harm's way by the same ecosystem that then turned his death into a fundraising moment. These are not isolated cases. Joshua John opened fire at a Dallas ICE field office in October 2025, killing 2 detainees and injuring another, before dying by suicide, radicalized inside the same anti-ICE protest ecosystem that produced Good and Preddy. Multiple other individuals were arrested for attempted murder after ambushing officers near ICE facilities in 2025. In every case, the machine that radicalized them, that told them they were heroes, that federal agents were monsters, that violence against enforcement was resistance, offered nothing when the consequences arrived. No legal defense fund, no press conference, no accountability for the rhetoric that sent them there. And then there are the people, the machine, aimed directly at the President of the United States. 3 times in less than 2 years. Ryan Routh documented anti-Trump, left-leaning public statements. September 2024, Trump International Golf Club. Thomas Matthew Crooks, Butler, Pennsylvania, July 2024. Cole Allen, the White House Correspondents' Dinner, April 2026. His manifesto assembling its vocabulary word for word from years of mainstream progressive media, calling the president a pedophile, a rapist, a traitor. 3 attempted assassinations, 3 individuals radicalized by the permission structure the machine built and maintained and never once accepted responsibility for building. And then there is the woman who did not pick up a gun. She picked up her phone. A United Healthcare employee, watching news of one of the Trump assassination attempts, typed, they missed? She was fired. And the left, the same movement that lionizes Luigi Mangione for murdering a health insurance CEO, the same movement that may deny, defend, depose as a slogan, and a Halloween costume, was briefly outraged that a corporation enforced basic standards of human decency. She expressed exactly what the machine had been building toward in its most loyal followers. The genuine, casual belief that killing the political opposition is not tragedy. It is a missed opportunity. Every single one of these people fits the same demographic profile described in this article. High empathy, history of trauma or disconnection, strong desire for belonging and moral purpose. People who were told by the machine, you are on the right side of history. Your anger is righteous. Your targets are monsters who deserve whatever comes to them. The machine handed them an identity, a cause, a community, and in several cases, a tactical manual, and then watched what happened. Some of them are dead. Some are in federal prison. None of them will be mentioned at the next Democratic fundraiser. That is the discard phase, running exactly on schedule. Quinn's Law Hashite. A liberal is any person for whom 2,000 years of human experience and history mean nothing now that they are here. The only thing that matters is whether you are useful to the collective right now. The second you are not, you are furniture. This applies to everyone the machine uses, including the ones it elevated, the machine, at full speed. Once you understand the mechanism, you see it operating everywhere, in the schools, in the welfare system, in the culture, in the numbers, in the capital itself, in the schools. What I am about to say, I say as someone inside the system every single day. The modern progressive educational model is not designed to produce students who can think independently. It is designed to produce students who feel the right things and defer to the right authorities. That is not education. That is warehousing. Grade inflation is the most visible symptom. Every child gets a trophy. Every child gets a diploma. Not because every child earned it, but because withholding it would require someone to make a judgment call. And judgment calls make parents complain. And parental complaints make administrators nervous. And nervous administrators do not get promoted. I've seen students graduate who missed 100 days of school. I have seen students graduate with straight Fs who completed 2 weeks of online credit recovery, answering questions on a screen using ChatGPT, and received full credit equivalent to a year of lab-based science. Instruction, the lab. The actual lab where you learn to form a hypothesis, run an experiment, and evaluate results. Replaced with a chatbot. Given identical weight on the transcript, the high school diploma in many of our districts is a participation trophy. It says, you were present enough of the time that we could not justify the paperwork to hold you back. It does not say, you can read at grade level, evaluate a source, construct an argument, or do math without a calculator. And the children who receive it do not know that. They believe they are educated because the institution told them they were. A population that cannot evaluate evidence is a population that cannot evaluate the people claiming to represent it. That is not an unfortunate side effect of progressive education policy. That is the design specification in the welfare system. Go back to phase 1 of the narcissistic cycle, the love bombing, the idealization, the overwhelming flood of warmth, validation, and promise that hooks the target before they have time to evaluate what they are actually agreeing to. The Great Society welfare programs of 1964 and 1965 were love bombing at legislative scale. Here's what it said. We see you. We see that the system has been unfair to you, that poverty has trapped you, that you deserve better. We are going to fix this. We are your family now. Monthly checks, housing assistance, food support. We will take care of you. And then phase 2, the devaluation, the marriage penalty built into the system, benefits that disappeared the moment a single mother married. A structure that incentivized dependency over employment, isolation over partnership, and reliance on government over reliance on community. In 1965, roughly 85% of Black children were raised in 2-parent households, a community that had survived slavery, Jim Crow, and systematic exclusion while maintaining extraordinary family cohesion. Within 1 generation of the Great Society programs, that collapsed to below 30%. The machine love-bombed an entire demographic. Then it restructured their lives to ensure they could not leave. That is not incompetence. That is the cycle in the culture. February 22nd, 2026. Milan, Italy. Jack Hughes, 24 years old, bleeding, missing front teeth, American flag around his shoulders. First men's Olympic hockey gold in 46 years. He says, I love the USA. Tonight was all for the country. Simple sentence, no qualifications. The Huffington Post published a trauma guide for people who could not handle watching that. They consulted 3 therapists. The clinical term for the discomfort, they explained, is cognitive dissonance. American pride at an Olympic event is now a clinical condition. Compare that to 1980, when Jimmy Carter, a Democrat, called Coach Herb Brooks from Camp David to congratulate the team. The whole country celebrated together 46 years ago. Same country, same flag, in the numbers. Gallup, June 2025. 58% of Americans say they are extremely or very proud to be American record low, down from 87% in January 2001. Republicans, 92% proud. Democrats, 36%, down 26 points in a single year. Gen Z Democrats, 24% proud, with more expressing no pride than pride. These are people on TikTok, in air conditioning, with iPhones containing more computing power than NASA had when we put men on the moon. Systematically taught to be ashamed of the place that made all of it possible, in the Capitol. Trump asked every member of Congress who agrees that the first duty of American government is to protect American citizens to stand up. The Republican side stood. The Democratic side sat, stared at the floor, and waited it out. When he introduced Sage, a young woman whose school made consequential decisions about her gender identity and deliberately excluded her parents, Democrats sat again. Over 40 members boycotted the address entirely, choosing move-on rallies over the constitutionally described joint session. Article 2, Section 3, the President shall from time to time give to the Congress information of the State of the Union. Congress. Their response had all the dignity of a 7-year-old who did not get the birthday present he wanted. Quinn's Law #3. The amount of wealth in any given area is inversely proportional to the number of Democrats running it. Detroit, Baltimore, Chicago, San Francisco, St. Louis, Memphis, poorest, most dangerous, most crumbling, all run exclusively by Democrats for decades. The permission structure. What happens when you call someone a pedophile on national television for years? April 25, 2026, Cole Thomas Allen, 31 years old, Caltech mechanical engineering degree, master's in computer science, had checked into the Washington Hilton days before the White House Correspondents' Dinner. His own family had concerns about his increasingly radical statements. His brother warned law enforcement. He walked in armed anyway, because not one person stopped him. His manifesto used specific language: pedophile, rapist, and traitor. He chose buckshot over slugs specifically to minimize casualties. He wrote rules of engagement for murdering the President of the United States and as many cabinet members as he could reach. At 8:34 p.m., he charged past the security checkpoint, fired at least once, and was stopped at the top of a staircase leading directly into the room where the President, the First Lady, Vice President Vance, Defense Secretary Hegseth, Secretary of State Rubio, and approximately 2,600 other people were sitting down to dinner. One agent took a round to his vest. He survived. Allen did not make up those words independently. He assembled them from a media ecosystem that had been broadcasting those accusations for years. Rosie O'Donnell calling the president a serial pedophile rapist on television. Representative James Tellerico claiming on HBO he was in the middle of a secret pedophile ring. Representative Hakeem Jeffries stating he was running a pedophile protection program. If you genuinely believe the president is a child rapist, shooting him is not violence. It is heroism. The permission structure is built by making the target into a monster, systemically, loudly, and without consequence. Network Contagion Research Institute research found that 38.5% of respondents said murdering President Trump would be partially justified or more. Of that group, 56% was left of center. Only 20% was right of center. Among very liberal Americans, a quarter said political violence can be justified. Among conservatives, only 6%. This is the same hotel where Ronald Reagan nearly died on March 30, 1981. John Hinckley Jr., 6 shots in 1.7 seconds. Press Secretary James Brady, a bullet to the head, permanent brain damage, death in 2014 ruled a homicide, 33 years delayed. 2 Republican presidents, same hotel, 45 years apart. The critics called the White House ballroom Trump is building a vanity project. The above-ground ballroom is privately funded. What matters is what President Trump confirmed. The military is building a massive complex under the ballroom. The ballroom essentially becomes a shed, a classified military command facility. Blast-resistant concrete, rebar as thick as your wrist at 6-inch spacing, engineered to survive an electromagnetic pulse that would fry every standard wire in Washington. The people filing lawsuits to halt construction are largely from the same coalition that spent 2 years calling Trump an existential fascist threat. They created the climate. Now they're in federal court trying to halt the facility that reduces the physical consequences of that climate. We got lucky is not a security doctrine. The vest held is not a long-term plan. 2 Republican presidents, 1 hotel, 45 years. The pattern does not require a PhD to read. How to protect the people you love. I want to come back to what I said at the beginning, because I mean every word of it. The people caught in this system are not the enemy. They are the victims. Good people with big hearts and genuine desires for justice and connection who are targeted because of those exact qualities. Being chosen says nothing about your worth and everything about a predator's wiring. You cannot logic someone out of a grooming process. This is the most common mistake well-meaning people make. You pull out the statistics, cite the sources, make the airtight case, and the person you are trying to help responds with more emotion, more defensiveness, and usually moves further into the group for protection. The cult prepared them for exactly that attack. Your facts are not a surprise. They are the expected enemy. The training already told them that anyone who challenges the narrative does so out of hatred or ignorance. The antidote to grooming is not logic. It is relationship. The same thing the groomer offered, genuine, consistent, unconditional connection, is the only thing with the power to compete with the group's hold. Here is why that is true, and why it matters that you understand the mechanism and not just the advice. The very first thing a cult does, the very first move, before any of the other tactics, is isolate the target from their existing relationships. We covered this. It is the first criterion in the cult checklist. And it is not first because it is the easiest thing to do. It is first because it is the most important thing to do. Because the cult's architects understand something about human psychology that most people never think about explicitly. Family connection can break the grip. A person who is embedded in a strong, loving, stable family, people who know their history, who remember who they were before the movement, who love them unconditionally and not contingent on ideological compliance, that person is genuinely harder to hold. The cult cannot be their only source of belonging if they already have belonging. The cult cannot be their only source of identity if they already know who they are. The cult cannot threaten them with excommunication if excommunication does not leave them alone. This is why the movement encourages people to cut off MAGA relatives. This is why a Yale psychiatrist called family estrangement essential for your mental health. This is why Communist Goal 41, read into the congressional record in 1963, explicitly called for raising children away from parental influence. They are not attacking the family because of abstract ideology. They are attacking the family because the family is the most effective counter-grooming mechanism in existence. They know that, and they have been systematically dismantling it for 60 years. So when I say the antidote is relationship, I'm not offering you a soft, feel-good alternative to the hard work of changing someone's mind. I am telling you the mechanism the predator class is most afraid of. Stay in the relationship. Be the evidence that love is not conditional on ideology. Ask questions instead of making statements. Not, that is wrong because here are the facts, but that is interesting. How did you come to that conclusion? What would change your mind about part of it? The person who can answer that question, who can name what would change their mind, is free. Clinical approaches to helping people exit high control groups emphasize curiosity over confrontation. The capacity to name what would change my mind is identified as a primary marker of recovered independent thought. And the most radical thing you can do in the current political environment is to go home, love your spouse, raise your children with clear values, eat dinner together, go to church, know your neighbors, and stay embedded in a genuine human community that exists independently of any political movement. That drives them crazy. It is also just a good life. The bottom line. The modern American left is not merely wrong on policy. Reasonable people can disagree on policy. What they have become is something deeper and more troubling. An ideological movement built on the exact mechanisms that clinical psychologists use to describe predatory, high-control group behavior. Isolation from family, love-bombing new members, devaluation of dissent, discard of the non-compliant, language control, public confession rituals, apocalyptic threat maintenance, absolute conformity enforced through social punishment. That is not a political party. That is a cult with a fundraising operation, a really good social media strategy, and a clinical understanding of exactly which psychological vulnerabilities to exploit in the populations they target. I did not arrive at this through cable news or rage scrolling. I arrived at it the way I arrive at everything, by reading primary sources, examining evidence, identifying patterns, and applying the same critical thinking I teach my students every single day. Every accusation is a confession. They call us a cult while excommunicating anyone who asks a question. They call us fascists while weaponizing every institution of government against political opponents. They call us a threat to democracy while running the most ideologically conformist political machine this country has ever seen. But what do I know? I am only a science teacher and Army combat medic who has spent decades watching the precise psychological mechanisms described in this article destroy people from the inside out, who opened a school and a fire station and a hospital in Iraq while some of these politicians were busy calling America irredeemably evil, who escorted little girls to school so they would not be murdered for wanting an education, and who still shows up every morning to a high-need classroom full of kids the public school system has written off, trying to give them the one thing no political movement can manufacture: the ability to think for themselves. If this article made you think, like this article so the algorithm shows it to people who need to read it. Subscribe and ring the bell. I try to put out articles every day. Share this. Every share counts 12x in the X algorithm. There is someone on your feed right now who needs to read this more than you did. Use it. Comment below. Which part hit closest to home? Which section describes someone you know? Tell me. I read every reply. And if you want more of this, the data, the history, the science, the stories, join Beastkey's classroom community on X or subscribe on YouTube. Even better, subscribe to my X account. About the cost of a cup of coffee per month. That is it. Your support keeps this classroom open. And I promise, I will never run out of material as long as the left keeps trying to outdumb itself.